All right, this is an interesting video. In 1963, the CIA classified a book, not a military strategy, not a weapons blueprint, not a field report from some Cold War intelligence operation, but a book about what happens when civilizations end. The author was a man named Chan Thomas, and his book laid out a theory that the Earth goes through cyclical cataclysms, pole shifts, crustal displacements, magnetic field reversals, events that wipe even advanced civilizations off the map and reset the human clock to zero. They stopped its publication, and for 50 years, that was the end of the story. Then, in 2013, under a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information request, they released 57 pages of a much longer book. And what they kept is what matters for the topic of this video, the chapters on how these mechanisms actually work, what happens to Earth's magnetic field during a shift, the connections to aliens, and the aftermath, what the world would look like after everything resets. Now, for a long time, nobody could explain why a book that a lot of very rational people and mainstream science would dismiss as pseudoscience, that's right, this book, why would this book need to be classified by the CIA for 50 years? And that extremely strange mystery is what this video is about. In researching this video, we pulled on the classic thread, and that thread happened to connect to 5 separate discoveries in 5 separate fields that all point to the same conclusion. An archaeological site in Turkey with over 200 stone pillars buried underground, carved out 12,000 years ago, with 90% of it still unexcavated after 3 decades of knowing it's there. A sister site 46 kilometers away where they just found the first human face ever carved on one of those pillars. They found that in October of last year. An Oxford professor who spent 40 years surveying 600 stone circles and found the same measurement unit across 1,000 miles of open ocean, then watching his entire body of work be erased from the academic record. 2 scientific papers about a catastrophic comet 12,800 years ago that were published, peer-reviewed, and then retracted, while the majority of their own authors publicly disagreed with the retraction. Then finally, the Dartmouth-educated defense contractor whose book connecting all of it, the CIA locked away for half a century. 5 discoveries, 5 fields, and in every case, the questions they raised got shut down before they were answered. And the CIA's behind all of it. Our first thread starts in southeastern Turkey on a limestone ridge called Göbekli Tepe. You've probably heard of Göbekli Tepe. It's a classic pseudoscience talking point. In 1963, a joint survey from the universities of Istanbul and Chicago found some broken limestone slabs sticking out of the ground. They assumed they were medieval gravestones, noted them in their survey log, and moved on. 30 years went by. 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt visited the site, recognized the broken slabs for what they actually were, which was the tops of massive T-shaped pillars buried in the hillside. And Klaus understood that what he was looking at was older than anything anyone had ever found. The pillars were carved from limestone, 3 to 6 meters tall, some weighing 8 to 10 metric tons. Big. And they were shaped using flint tools, because that's all that these poor old people had. No metal, no wheels, no draft animals, just some flint and a love of the game. And there's still an unfinished pillar sitting in the quarry 7 meters long, and it's roughly 50 metric tons, nearly as heavy as an M1 Abrams tank. They couldn't move it, but they tried. But they moved the other ones, and they didn't build downhill from the quarry. They moved these pillars up to 500 meters uphill to the top of the ridge. And Schmidt spent the rest of his career at Göbekli Tepe. He eventually died in 2014, still digging, still excavating. And the line he's most remembered for is his quote, "First came the temple, then the city." And what Klaus meant was that Göbekli Tepe could invert everything we thought we knew about how civilizations develop, because it's really old, much older than the other civilizations that we think are old. And the standard model for old civilizations goes like this. People settle down, they start farming, they build villages, they develop religion, and eventually they and build monuments. Göbekli Tepe seems to indicate the opposite happened. The monuments came first and the settlement came later. This is all predicated on radiocarbon dating, of course, but Göbekli Tepe's oldest radiocarbon dates put construction at roughly 9500 BCE. To put that into context, the Great Pyramid of Giza was built around 2560 BCE, a 7,000 year gap. The wheel, writing, pottery in the Near East, all of it came thousands of years after these people were chopping away at these big old stones with flint. Smithsonian Magazine put it this way, quote, "There's more time between Göbekli Tepe and the Sumerian clay tablets than from Sumer to today." Yeah. And we treat Sumer as ancient history. The beginning of recorded civilization in Göbekli Tepe is as far from Sumer as Sumer is from us. These people had no writing, no metal tools, no pottery, no domesticated animals, and according to the standard model, no agriculture. How'd they eat and shit? With all that being said, they somehow organized a construction project that required quarrying multi-ton limestone pillars, shaping them with flint, and moving them uphill to a ridge. That's the foundation. What they actually carved on those pillars is what tends to make it a bit stranger. They're abstract architecture. If you look closely, you can tell they're people. Carved in low relief to the limestone, you can see arms bent at the elbows with hands and fingers, belts around the waists, fox pelt loincloths, stola garments, pendants, all things the German Archaeological Institute team running the excavation described as monumental anthropomorphic sculptures. These are stone representations of human figures standing upright 10 to 18 feet tall, arranged in circles with two larger pillars in the center. These people were built, all right? Now, if you look at them, they're people. But there's one thing missing. They're all faceless. They have no eyes, no nose, nothing. The DAI confirmed they are, quote, always depicted as faceless. There are no eyes, no nose, or mouth present. They appear to be deliberately left blank. Whoever carved arms and hands and belts and loincloths into these pillars chose to not give them faces. And like a Skyrim puzzle, each enclosure has its own dominant animal carved into a pillar. Snakes in one, foxes in another, boars, vultures, scorpions, lions, all depicted in aggressive postures and all presumably males. So what we're looking at is a 12,000-year-old humanoid figure arranged in a ritual circle surrounded by aggressive animal guardians with no faces, and pretty much nobody knows who they're supposed to represent or why the faces were left blank. I have an idea. Would you like to hear my theory? My theory is that it was just a coincidence and they didn't know what they were doing. That's always my theory. I think people are really stupid. They were really stupid. We're really stupid. Knowing how dumb people are now, with how much access we have to stuff, I feel like people back then must have been really unbelievably stupid. Just listening to the voice in their head, carve, stone, no face. Julian Jaynes' bicameral mind, very interesting theory. Unsubstantiated, but titillating to read. All right, the idea that the conscience, the voice in your head is a command from God, and not your own voice in your own head. Anyways, in 2020, two researchers from Tel Aviv University, Gil Hackley and Avi Gopher, published something in the Cambridge Archaeological Journal that changed how people understood the site. They found that the center points of three of the main enclosures, B, C, and D, form a near-perfect equilateral triangle. Now, if you failed math, that means the sides measure roughly 63 feet each, and the deviation from a perfect triangle is about 10 inches. And when you take into consideration the total size, that is a 0.13% margin of error. Very impressive. And what that means is that these three enclosures weren't built independently over time. They were planned as a single project, meaning somebody probably drew a geometric blueprint 12,000 years ago before the stones were quarried with flint tools. Hockley and Gopher put it this way in the Cambridge Archaeological Journal. They said, quote, certain planning capabilities and practices, such as the use of geometry and the formulation of floor plans, were traditionally assumed to have emerged much later. Traditionally assumed, of course. Traditional assumptions, it's the whole point of science, I think, is to just have your traditional assumptions be blasted out of the water. For example, me thinking that I could trust my government. I'm just kidding, I've never thought that. Anyways, how about the skull cult? Ever heard of them? Creepy little fuckers. In 2017, Science Advances published a paper documenting 3 modified human skulls that were found at Göbekli Tepe. Deep grooves had been carved across the foreheads using flint tools, and one skull had a hole drilled through the parietal bone, 6.7 millimeters wide on the outside, and positioned so that when you hang the skull from a cord, it faces forward. It's a fucking decoration, all right? Like Spirit Halloween, pretty much. The DAI described the perforation as designed to suspend the skull from, quote, a post or the beam of a building, perhaps even from a T-shaped pillar with no face. So, we give the monument a face, a painted human skull hanging from the faceless stone giant. Really interesting. Red ochre painted on the bone, modifications made shortly after death while the bone was still elastic. because bones are elastic, if you didn't know. So now we have a previously undocumented form of skull veneration from the oldest monumental site on Earth. This should be fucking worldwide news. This isn't a campsite. This is organized religion, geometric planning, and ritual practice at a pretty sizable scale that all was not supposed to exist for another 6,000 years. I'm gonna take my pants off, run around fucking naked. We've barely looked at this thing. What the fuck, dude? Now, there's been ground-penetrating radar surveys that have detected at least 20 large enclosures still buried underground with an estimated 200 plus pillars total. And since all this came out, roughly 30 years, the excavation team has uncovered 72 of them. At the current pace, full excavation would take around 150 years. But Göbekli Tepe is not alone. And this is where it gets bigly, much bigly than one site. Starting in 2021, the Turkish Ministry of Culture launched the Taz Tapeler project, which was a coordinated excavation of 12 related sites across southeastern Turkey, all from the same period. A bunch of sites, a bunch of institutions, and 219 researchers all working concurrently on this idea. It's pretty exciting. These sites share the same sort of T-shaped pillars, the same animal iconography, serpents, foxes, leopards, boars, vultures, me, plus the same construction techniques and non-local materials like obsidian and basalt that confirm trade, long-distance exchange, bartering, maybe not trade, but long-distance exchange networks they were operating at this time. At Sefertepe, they found a chamber with over 30 human skulls, and all skulls shared the same veneration practices at a completely different location, guys. This was a civilization, all right? This isn't just one place, Göbekli Tepe, 12,000 years old, really impressive or whatever, man. This is a network. It's a whole thing, a civilization-scale building program, hundreds of miles apart between these, using shared symbols and shared construction methods 11,000 years ago. It's pretty cool. Then more comes out, of course. In 2025, subsurface scanning detected rectangular domestic structures on the slopes of Göbekli Tepe, evidence that people lived there year-round. Grinding stones and cereal remnants, carved channels feeding into cisterns cut from bedrock. The excavation team described this as the oldest known facilities for drinking water on Earth. Interesting. A Nova PBS documentary that premiered last month called it evidence that Göbekli Tepe may have been humanity's oldest known city, which I feel like people already sort of, I feel like people already kind of suspected that. You don't really just get like a bunch of, well, maybe you do get a bunch of old people just building shit. And then they're just like, you know what? Let's all die. Not write anything down. Let's build a bunch of shit, kill each other, smash each other's heads in, maybe humanoid, contract herpes, and then just be forgotten. Apparently what I just said is total horseshit and didn't actually happen. Because around 8,000 BCE, it was buried. They buried it. It wasn't abandoned. It was buried. The enclosures were buried. They were deliberately backfilled with soil and flint debris and animal bones. And the covering involves both intentional human activity and, of course, natural slope erosion. But the fact remains that someone filled these enclosures in, and that filling is what preserved the site for 10,000 years. And the filling even happened way before everything else, too. So who the filled it in? Now, idiots like myself are going to be like, why don't you just dig it all up? What the But the archaeological community says that this slow pace of excavation is standard methodology, and it makes sense. Lee Claire told NPR in a hushed tone, "Why would I be so selfish as to dig the entire site and take these possibilities away from future generations of archaeologists?" And I said, "You're right, Lee. Pompeii has been known for over 250 years, and a third of it is still unexcavated. I'm just selfish, unlike you." How about this, though? Lee Claire himself doesn't even agree with Schmidt's original interpretation. He told interviewers that, "I don't agree with the idea of Göbekli Tepe as the smoking gun of the Neolithic." So this isn't an idiot like me disagreeing with a really smart person. This is like people actively involved in this stuff who understand methodology and they understand science and the importance of approaching things a certain way. They're disagreeing with each other, which that's really exciting. I love that. Now, I will say Göbekli Tepe was identified in 1994. It got UNESCO World Heritage status in 2018, 200 underground pillars, and it pretty much could rewrite the entire first chapter of human history. I want to know more about it. All right, I'm pretty selfish about that. I think that's fair to be selfish about. It is extraordinary, and everybody should learn more about it. But 46 kilometers away, there's another site that changes basically everything that I just showed you and told you about. Life already feels like you're running 1,000 tabs at once. I've got work, I've got bills, I've got friends, family, eating, hydrating, breathing. And for some reason, healthcare is the one tab I keep hitting the little middle mouse button as a shortcut to close on. That's why I use ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone you love. They've got more than 150,000 providers across all 50 states, and you can search by specialty, symptom, dermatology, dentistry, primary care, eye care, and over 200 other specialties. If you'd rather do a video visit, you can do that too if you're a little bit scared, all right, if you're timid. What I love is that you can read verified patient reviews, then see their real-time availability and click to book. And appointments usually happen fast, typically within 24 to 72 hours, and you can even sometimes score one same day in. All right, stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to zocdoc.com/Oompaville, zocdoc.com/Oompaville to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's zocdoc.com/Oompaville today. This message is sponsored by ZocDoc and also PD. In October of 2025, they found something there that nobody really expected. They're always finding shit that nobody expects. How about the sister of Göbekli Tepe? Karahan Tepe. It sits in the Tek Mountains 46 kilometers east of Göbekli Tepe. Systematic excavation began in 2019 under Professor Nekmi Karul from Istanbul University. I'm butchering all of these names. And what Nekmi's team found there makes Göbekli Tepe look like an introduction to a much longer story. Karahan Tepe has over 250 T-shaped megaliths underground, more than Göbekli Tepe, and it was built around 9400 BCE and occupied continuously for roughly 1,500 years. It does not have UNESCO status, and most people have never heard of it until now because most people watch my videos. Press the like button, viewer. Thank you. And in October of 2025, Karul's team uncovered a 135 centimeter T-shaped pillar with something no one had ever seen before, literally, a three-dimensional human face carved directly into the fucking stone with a huge prominent ridge bone like me. Look at that. Look at that shit. I have a crazy brow. Look at that. Deep set eyes, blunt nose, angular jaw. No, you lost me there. I don't look like that. So since these sites have been known, across all of them, every single T-pillar had been faceless, and the assumption was that the facelessness was deliberate, some kind of symbolic, conscious choice to represent the understandings of the humans of that time. But no, says the T-pillar at Karahan Tepe. Karul told the art newspaper, the only missing element in this pattern was the face. The human face pillar we encountered in a structure containing domestic elements such as grinding stones fills this gap. Now, the context of what I just said is very important. The faced T-shaped pillar was found not in a monumental enclosure like the ones at Göbekli Tepe. This was in a domestic structure, building with grinding stones where people probably lived and worked. The monumental pillars are faceless. The domestic pillar had a face. It's a distinction that matters. So not only is it a conscious decision to just not put faces on pillars, it's a conscious decision to not put faces on monuments, monumental pillars and monumental spaces, and then put faces on domestic spaces. Very strange. Archaeology Magazine named it a top 10 discovery of 2025, but face pillar still is not the strangest thing at Karahan Tepe. There is a subterranean chamber. The excavation team calls it Structure AB, and inside it are 11 giant stone, huge phalluses carved directly from the bedrock, not placed there, but carved in there, rising out of the floor of the chamber. Big phalluses. And watching over them is a carved human head with a beard and a serpent's body extending parallel to the ground. It's unbelievable this isn't just big time mega news. I feel like this is fucking insane. The chamber has a separate entrance and exit connected by a serpentine water channel cut into the stone. So you walk in one way and you come out another, and the water flows through with you. Karul described what the space was for. He said, a ceremonial process, entering the building from one end and exiting at the other end, having to parade in the presence of the human head. It's a rite of passage, guys, 11,000 years ago. What the? Dude, Deuterostone, we're both a butt and a mouth. That's what I think it's about. They knew back then. In a different chamber at Karahantepe, they found a statue, 2.3 meters tall, that's 7.5 feet, seated on a stone bench with deeply etched ribs visible across the torso, clasped hands, and emphasized big old on it. Emphasized genitals. They love emphasizing the balls. All right, guys, it's really strange. It's been called the corpse statue or the ribbed man. It's one of the oldest realistic life-sized human sculptures on fucking planet Earth, okay? And it was found in a subterranean room alongside human bones and a carved vulture stone. But then there's Seberg, another Tas Tepeler site, another communal building. And inside it, carved in high relief on a stone bench about 4 meters long, is what the journal Antiquity called the oldest known narrative scene in human history. It's 5 figures. The first panel shows a man holding his flanked by 2 leopards with their teeth bared mid-attack. I mean, look at this. It's fucking incredible. The second panel shows a squatting figure with a 6-fingered hand facing a bull while holding a snake or a rattle. I'm not exactly sure. The leopard's teeth and the bull's horns are deliberately exaggerated like the other man's. They're carved deeper than the rest of the relief to make sure you notice them. Somebody carved a narrative into stone 11,000 years ago. Anima, characters, conflict, symbolism. We're only reading this story because it was fucking published. I guess it was excavated and published a couple years ago. This is just some of the incredibly interesting stuff that they found. There's shared pillars, shared symbols, shared construction techniques, all spanning hundreds of miles in a time in which this was not thought possible but 40 years ago. Turkey isn't the only place with this extremely confusing problem. An Oxford professor found the same thing across 600 stone circles, 1,000 miles apart, in Britain and France, and his career was destroyed for saying it. Old fella by the name of Alexander Thom was born in 1894 in Carradale, Scotland. At Glasgow, he was a classmate of John Logie Baird, the man who invented the television. Subtle flex. Thom went into engineering and spent 16 years as a professor of engineering at Oxford. During World War II, he served as a principal scientific officer at the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough, where he built the first high-speed wind tunnel in Britain and assisted Barnes Wallis with the bouncing bomb, the weapon used in the Dam Busters raids of May 1943, one of the most famous operations of the entire war. The bouncing bomb. You've seen videos of it, I'm sure. Looks kind of fun. This guy's not a hobbyist. That's the fucking point, all right? He's a precision engineer with military credentials and an Oxford professorship. He's very smart. And after the war, he turned his skill and talent towards something nobody in his field was studying. Stone circles made by the ancients. Over the next 40 plus years, Thom visited over 450 megalithic sites and professionally surveyed roughly 300 of them across Scotland, England, Wales, and France. And not with a tape measure, not with the Stanley Fat Max 25 foot, all you need, let's be real, but with theodolites, precision surveying instruments that measure angles to a fraction of a degree. He used the same tools that he'd been using in aeronautical engineering, so, you know, they're good. Thom approached the megalithic sites the same way an engineer approaches a construction project. You measure angles, plot layouts, test for mathematical relationships, some things that the average archaeologist might not think to look for because it doesn't really matter. Thom found these relationships though. His 4-year survey of the stone rows at Carnac in Brittany was described as the largest archaeological project of the 20th century in terms of man hours. And this is the man whose man hours were erased. His work was erased. What Thom found across hundreds of stone circles spanning over 1,000 miles was a standard unit of measurement. He called it the megalithic yard, 2.72 feet within a precision of plus or minus 3/1000ths of a foot. Published in 1955 in the Journal of the Royal Statistical Society, this was confirmed across site after site from the Scottish Highlands to the coast of beautiful old Britain. And then came a coincidence, something that was difficult to explain. 3 sites, the Rings of Brodgar in Orkney, Scotland, the Bank and Ditch diameters at Avebury in England, and the Newgrange in Ireland, all measure approximately 125 megalithic yards in diameter. And it was Aubrey Burrell himself, the man who called the megalithic yard a chimera, who confirmed this comparison. Critics confirmed this comparison. So these are similarities hundreds of miles apart, separated by ocean, and built by people who we're told had no contact with each other. At least that's, standard belief. Some people would say that a shared measurement unit across 1,000 miles actually implies some form of a communication network. All right, guys, not just contact training. You can't really standardize a measurement to within 3/1000ths of a foot by describing it in conversation, especially when the conversation sounded like this. Somebody had to carry some kind of reference, standard, teacher application method, some kind of thing across open ocean. It implies an institution, not that these are just isolated tribes of men with no shirts and huge swollen independently stumbling on similar shapes within a few thousandths. Tom also found Pythagorean geometry built into the stone layouts. Triangles with exact integer ratios more than 2,000 years before Pythagoras was even born. So take that, you The data obviously was published. The measurements were replicated, the geometry was documented, and the archaeological establishment rejected it entirely. Aubrey Burrell, one of Britain's most prominent stone circle scholars, which are real things, called the megalithic yard a chimera, a grotesque statistical misconception. David Kendall at Cambridge ran his own statistical analysis in 1974. Douglas Heggie published a full-length critique in 1981, and Clive Ruggles, the most prominent critic, argued that the unit was no more precise than a man's stride, and accused Tom of selection bias in choosing which sites to survey. And to be clear, the criticism was not polite academic disagreement. Edmund Sixsmith, writing in Significance, the Journal of the Royal Statistical Society, described Tom's work as having been, quote, airbrushed from accepted wisdom, which is an unbelievable burn, dude. American archaeoastronomers watching from across the pond in America believe the British had, quote, set unduly high standards of proof and are unappreciative of a genius. They love infighting. Archaeology, all the sciences love just fighting about stuff. Just like, I'm right! No! I have more peers reviewing my study! How about let's all just get along and sit in a circle and hold hands? How about that, all right, dude? Because let's be real, it's like, it doesn't, who cares, really? It's just kind of cool. It's just like a little cherry on top. It's not really fucking important if you think about it. Inconsequential, really. Unless there's aliens or something like that, it's pretty fucking inconsequential. Now, to be extremely clear, the critique was over Tom's measurement to the exact millimeter. The critics argued about the precision, but there's still a pattern. 600 sites, consistent measurements, geometric planning across 1,000 miles. Some of them suggested it's just a stride. This is how people are kind of shaped all the same. That's how the pattern was never actually disproven. And Tom died in 1985 at the age of 91 years old. And by then, the megalithic yard had been effectively removed from mainstream archaeological discussion, which is really sad because he's old and stuff. And I feel bad for old people sometimes. If they're not in control of anything, I feel bad for them. But if they're in control of stuff, I feel rage. Not really. There's probably old people watching this. I'm sorry, olds. Is there any 90-year-olds watching this? How you doing? It is terribly sad that Tom was essentially written out of the textbooks with his old megalithic yard. And it wasn't until 2020 that Ewan McKee published a serious academic defense of the megalithic yard. Professor Challenger and His Lost Neolithic World. He published this through ArchaeoPress, attempting to rehabilitate Tom's data for a new generation of researchers, 35 years after he died. And then now people are kind of thinking about it again. That's really interesting and fun to me. I like looking, I talk about conspiracies all the fucking time, most of which are real, by the way. I'm actually more afraid to talk about stuff like this. Because it's so dumb and just like, but anyways, what does it mean? We have potential standardization patterns across stone circles, France, Britain, Ireland, Scotland, and we have this just unbelievable archaeological findings in Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe. What does it mean? What does it mean? Not that there's maybe more of an advancement to these civilizations than we thought before, but what the happened to them? That's the real question. I'll tell you what, 12,800 years ago, something did happen. The climate dropped very hard. Temperatures in the northern hemisphere fell by as much as 10 degrees Celsius in the span of decades. Megafauna that had survived the previous ice age, mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths, all of them went extinct. In North America, the Clovis culture, one of the earliest known human populations on the continent, vanished. This period is called the Younger Dryas. It lasted roughly 1,200 years, from about 12,800 to 11,600 years ago, and what caused it has been one of the most bitter scientific arguments of the last 2 decades. Guys, I've been keeping up with it too, and it is, I love talking about it. I'm sorry. I love talking about this. I love giants. I love all the dumb shit, man. I know it's not real. I know it's probably not real, but like, what if it is? I mean, obviously this is all real. I'm talking about the ancient civilization, the ancient civilization aspects, that there was like a lot that happened and it was wiped out. Anyways, there's a big conspiracy. 2007, Richard Firestone, Alan West, and James Kennett proposed a hypothesis in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. A cosmic impact, a comet or its fragments, struck the Earth at the onset of the Younger Dryas, which triggered the cooling, the extinctions, and the cultural collapse of that time. Now, a lot of that's debated. What's not debated is that the Younger Dryas happened. It did, and it was abrupt, and the megafauna did die. We know all that for sure. The Clovis folk, all that established science. Pretty cool. But what is in dispute, what has been in dispute for almost 20 years, is the cause. The mainstream position is that the melting ice sheets dumped fresh water into the North Atlantic, shutting down the ocean current systems that keep the northern hemisphere warm, or what's called AMOC, and the alternative is a cosmic impact, and a smaller camp points to volcanic triggers. Either way, some crazy shit happened, for sure. A lot of stuff died. The first, most likely one is definitely from some liberals, let's be real. Climate change? Really? You think climate change killed all those people? They didn't even have cars then. The debate has been quite brutal, by the way. Watching some of it makes me feel like a child trapped with 2 parents arguing and at each other, preceding a divorce. A nasty one. In 2023, Vance Holliday and a team of critics published what they called a comprehensive refutation of the impact hypothesis. A year later, the proponents published a rebuttal. Papers published, papers challenged, papers published, papers challenged. A 20-year cycle of claim and counterclaim. Basically diss tracks for smart people. In August of 2025, 2 new papers supporting the impact hypothesis were published in PLOS 1. One analyzing cometary dust and platinum anomalies in Baffin Bay sediment cores, which I don't know what any of that means, and the others documenting shocked quartz at Younger Dryas boundary sites. On February 11th of this year, just a few weeks ago, both papers were retracted. Neither retraction alleged fraud, neither alleged fabrication. The concerns were methodological. They were questions about how the data was analyzed, not whether the data was real. The authors' responses tell you basically everything you need to know about how this debate works. On the first paper, 8 authors publicly disagreed with the retraction. 1 agreed, 1 was neutral, and 12 did not respond. On the second paper, 8 disagreed and 10 didn't respond. The majority of the scientists who put their names on those papers rejected the retraction of their work, obviously. And Richard Firestone, the physicist at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab who started this entire debate in 2007, died in September of 2024 at age 78. Now, I want to be very clear about something. I love science, and I want to make it known that I'm not citing those retracted papers as evidence. I'm just talking about the fact that the retraction happened. And regardless of the author's objections, the papers carry an asterisk now. The retraction isn't the whole point, though, because those aren't the only papers, and the evidence those papers were trying to describe didn't just disappear when the journal pulled them. There's still physical evidence that, like, a lot of people sort of agree on. It's very interesting. In 2020, a team of 14 scientists led by Andrew Moore published a paper in Scientific Reports, that's a Nature Publishing Group journal, documenting something found at Abu Hurira. I cannot say that, I apologize. A village site in Syria, where my great-grandmother's from, or Lebanon, or just the Ottoman Empire, I guess. Sorry, great-great-grandmother. Glass. Glass formed at temperatures exceeding 2200 degrees Celsius. To understand what that number means, a typical house fire burns at around 1000 degrees Celsius. Lightning strikes can produce localized temperatures above 2000 degrees, but the melt glass at Abu Hurira wasn't found in a lightning pattern. Volcanism was also ruled out. The nearest volcanic activity is hundreds of miles from the site, and Neolithic people were too fucking stupid to generate temperatures anywhere near 2200 degrees. Idiots! I love talking shit about people who can't defend themselves or respond. Moore described it this way. He said, "This melt glass required enormous heat, far beyond anything that a group of hunters and gatherers could ever generate on their own." Yeah, you don't fucking say. The only known mechanism that produces temperatures exceeding 2200 degrees Celsius across a wide area is a nuclear bomb. No, this isn't Ancient Aliens. It's a cosmic airburst, an object entering the atmosphere and detonating above the surface, which that happens. It's not hypothetical. In 1908, something detonated over Tunguska, Siberia, and flattened millions of trees across 830 square miles. No crater. It never hit the ground. It just fucking blew up in the air. You scale that up, there you go. Not hypothetical, very real. That paper was published in 2020. It has not been retracted. By the way, this is about a book that was classified by the CIA, if you forgot about that. And Abu Huraira is not alone. As of 2022, researchers have documented evidence at 56 younger Dryas boundary sites across 4 continents: North America, South America, Europe, and the Mideast. In 2013, a team from Harvard published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences documenting a 100-fold increase in platinum concentration in the Greenland ice covers at the exact boundary layer 12,800 years ago, guys. Interesting. Now, intellectual honesty. Okay. The lead author of that platinum study, Mikhail Petev, is now a co-author on Holliday's 2023 refutation paper. He stands behind the measurement. The platinum is real, but he's argued the spike occurred roughly 20 years after the Younger Dryas onset, not at it. So the man who found the evidence disputes what it means. And what that means is the evidence for something catastrophic happening 12,800 years ago isn't just sitting in one lab from one research team in one country. It's all across the planets and has been gathered by different teams using different methods at different sites on different continents, but they do keep finding similar signatures at the same stratigraphic layers. Okay, platinum in the ice, melt glass in the ground. There's evidence at 56 sites. What does it mean? They don't have any idea. Do you know? Can you tell me? Because I have no idea. But I love this stuff. I could read about this all day long in archaeology, anthropology, mixology, like in The Sims, kinesiology, like all the dumb people I knew in high school. That's not real. I didn't go to high school. And I don't think I knew anybody doing kinesiology. Actually, the only person I knew who did, I think, kinesiology and therapy applications was a genius. So I'm full of shit. I apologize. I'm so full of shit. Please forgive me. Let's get back to where we started, motherfuckers. The CIA classified a book in the 1960s called The Adam and Eve Story. It was written by a man named Chan Thomas. And in the hook, I told you what the book was about. It was about cyclical cataclysms, pole shifts, the Earth's crust suddenly displacing, supersonic winds, magnetic field reversals, theories that sound like pseudoscience. And if it were pseudoscience, the CIA would have ignored it, right? They didn't ignore it, which gives it credence somehow. Obviously, they classified this book. They even stopped its publication in 1966. And when they finally released a version in 2013 under a FOIA request, it was 57 sanitized pages of what various sources describe as a much larger work. The chapters they kept deal with how the mechanisms work, what happens to the Earth's magnetic field, connections to UFOs, UAPs, and the aftermath of a cataclysm. The parts that explain how are the parts that they did not declassify. So who was Chan Thomas? Most people who've heard of this book assume the author was a conspiracy theorist or a fringe thinker, someone operating out of their mother's basement with a typewriter, their in their hand, and a theory. Old Chan's full name was Dr. Chansey Chan Powers Thomas. He was born February 15th, 1920, the year of the rat. In Kansas City, he attended Dartmouth College and Columbia University and graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering in 1943. After graduation, he went to work as a project engineer for Bell Aircraft, where he worked on the Rascal program, which was a nuclear-armed air-to-surface missile. Doesn't sound that much like a rascal. Then Douglas Aircraft, where he worked on the A-4D Skyhawk, which is a Navy attack aircraft that saw combat in Nam. And then he moved to McDonnell Douglas Advanced Concept Division. Not exactly his mother's basement, in his hand, and a typewriter. I'm gonna be real with you. He also appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson on April 7th, 1965, and taught ESP classes to 560 students at UCLA. Weird. Very complicated. ESP, by the way, really strange. This guy is objectively not a one-dimensional genius or a one-dimensional crackpot. He's a two-dimensional genius crackpot. He was a Dartmouth-educated electrical engineer working in advanced defense concepts who also believed in psychic phenomena. But the part that matters for this story is where he worked and what his employer was doing while he was writing this book on ancient cataclysms. At McDonnell Douglas, Chan Thomas worked beside Dr. Robert M. Wood on a gravity control research project. The internal project name was BitBur. The project's budget was over $500,000, which is roughly $4 to $5 million in today's big-time monies. All right? A government intelligence agency expressed interest in the project, which led to a draft proposal called Project Skylight. Robert Wood described it years later in the MUFON Journal, quote, "The goal was to mimic, imitate, or duplicate the observables associated with UFOs." Gravity shit. Now, the proposal did not go through with McDonnell Douglas, but the CIA did classify Chan Thomas' book. So this motherfucker was writing about cyclical cataclysms, pole shifts, magnetic fields, all that crazy stuff while working for a defense contractor on a government-funded gravity project that was trying to replicate the observables of UFOs, and the agency that expressed interest in that latter project is the same one that classified the motherfucker's book. What? So, did the CIA classify a book that this guy wrote that was a little too close to the truth? Maybe what happened to Göbekli Tepe, maybe what happened in the Younger Dryas, maybe what happened to the people at the stone circles. I don't have any idea. I don't know. I think that the fact that it was classified makes it a lot more suspicious than it actually is, especially with how much people argue about this. People want to know what happened to all the people back then. There's also that hammer thing that's just like totally disproven or whatever. All this stuff, all the fun stuff's not real. But I tell you what is real. The evidence at Göbekli Tepe, that's real. The melt glass at Abu Huraira is real. The CIA document being classified, that's real. Tom surveys are real. The retraction controversy is real. Now, whether the answer to all of these different interesting threads is a lost civilization or an overlooked chapter in human development or something nobody else has proposed yet, those are all legitimate possibilities, maybe. And the reality is, we have no fucking idea, but it does look pretty damn suspicious. And classic conspiracy style, if you take the pattern of slow excavation, academic erasure, journal retractions, classifications, all these mechanisms that are often applied to, conspiracies and bureaucracy, it's all things that get people to stop asking questions, and nowadays it just raises suspicion. So I'm on the side of being really excited to see what will come out. I think aliens are definitely real. I want to know what happened to the people of the Younger Dryas. I also do completely understand that all of these retractions and things and walking back on things and denial of certain evidences, it's a very important part of science. But my God, is it fun to believe in shit that's crazy? I tell you what. What do I think? I think that people have existed for a very long period of time, and what we are taught in mainstream archaeology and history and science and stuff like that, when it's not about war, is probably mostly true. I think the Bible and biblical archaeology overshadows a lot of the really old stuff. And is that because of the idea that there's, a ton of religious people who are like, well, this kind of undermines my belief? I don't exactly know. I don't really give a fuck. I think that those things can coexist. I know that people think the Earth is 6,000 years old. I think that's really dumb, and I don't see how that's even, I'm just yapping now. I apologize. What do you guys think? I thought the CIA declassifying a document about cyclical cataclysms and not releasing the full thing after it was partially released from a FOIA request, I think that's really fucking creepy and weird, and it just ties in with all these little interesting threads. So I wanted to bring it up. It's more of a celebration of human science, I feel like, and it's kind of cool how far we're coming in what we're learning and exploring, and I'm really excited to see what else we can uncover over the next couple of years. So thank you. Appreciate you guys watching.